And the topic for today's session is dealing with China. And to speak on this topic, we have with us the very famous Professor R. Vaidyanathan, who needs no introduction. But I'll still begin with a formal introduction to those of you who don't know him. So, uh, this is about Professor Vaidyanathan. Dr. R. Vaidyanathan is a retired professor of finance at IIM Bangalore, a graduate of the Loyola College, Madras, and a master's from the Indian Statistical Institute, Calcutta. He obtained his doctorate from the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, where he also taught for 4 years. He's a two times Fulbright scholar and a fellow of ICSSR. He's a visiting faculty at various universities in the USA and UK. He has been selected by Business Today as one of the 10 best professors at all IIMs. He has the rare privilege of being in various committees of regulators like SEBI, RBI, IRDA, and PFRDA. He's also a consultant to many organizations and he's on the board of many corporates. There's much more to do about Professor Vaidyanathan. I can keep going on and on. But with these words, sir, I welcome you to our platform. And I think this is a very important topic today because, in view of the fact that earlier we only thought about dealing with China on economic terms and on the fact that China has the highest GDP in the world in terms of per PPP. But now in post-COVID world, there's a new dimension that has got added to it. And I think this topic has become even more relevant now, I believe. So with these words, sir, I welcome you and over to you, sir.
I would like to start with mentioning there is a need for comprehensively understanding China and dealing with it. So the first point I would like to say is significantly our knowledge about China is mostly through the Western lens, the American or European lens. What Wall Street Journal writes, what New York Times writes, or what Pentagon tells us, or what State Department. And I think time has come for us to seriously think in terms of understanding China using our own classes, our own lens and other thing. That's the first point. We don't, unfortunately, have enough number of people who are studying China. China has got something, I am told, 16 to 17 India study centers all over China, spread over China. Actually, it has got a Tamil broadcasting station from 1950, believe me. And AIR used to send, even today, what one can call on second man to one gentleman to that Tamil broadcast station. Nobody knows what he is broadcasting against India, for India. Anyhow, this is going on. In other words, their understanding of us is much, much more compared to our knowledge about them. If you ask me, practically, we don't have much of knowledge at all about information about China. China mean we think Z, for instance. You can't tell another, 7 or 8 leaders of China other than Z, even the supposedly experts and other thing. Anyhow, see, we have something like 3,500 kilometers of border with China. I think this is most often forgotten by people. With Pakistan, we have 3,300, another this side. And if you look back at the history for the last 2,000, 3,000 years, so whatever is available to us, there has never been any war with China, except in 1962 and this recent skirmish at Galwan. And even though Tibet was the in-between territory, but no Chinese kings entered into India and vice versa. Hu Qi was a very famous philosopher and a knowledgeable person in China, who is considered as a sort of wise man of China of the 1940s. He was also the vice chancellor of the Peking University. He was ambassador of China to to Washington. he gave a speech in the late 30s at Harvard commencement, what they call our convocation address type of thing. There he mentioned late 30s, early 40s, when the Second World War was raging. He mentioned very interesting observation. He told India conquered China without firing a single bullet. This is one of the very interesting statements, actually. What he meant is India influenced China in terms of its art, literature, architecture, medicine, mathematics, so many areas, actually. And the Chinese kings used to send their ministers through sea route to Burma. And then much of this was collected from India. And it facilitated in terms of understanding huge number of these areas, according to him. Much later, of course, when he became Peking University chairman and other thing, he also told that the influence of India has made us very, very weak. In the sense we are talking about non-violence and this and that and another thing, which is not appropriate for us. That's a separate issue. But the point he made is very interesting. When Chiang Kai-shek actually left China, ran away, and then got into what is currently known as Taiwan. That time it was known as Formosa. He took along with him something like 13, 14 shipload of material. Believe me, 5 to 6 of them contained Indian material pertaining to India in terms of artifacts, in terms of literature, in terms of... I have been to Taiwan. I have been to China also many times. Taiwan, more importantly, there is a hilltop, there is a museum. There are huge, halls, which if possible, I would encourage each one of you to visit actually. You will find that a significant number of Indian material, our idols, our literature, our Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit, all languages are represented. And a huge amount of, the ancient India is reflected there actually. So our relationship with China is, let's be very clear, quote unquote, civilizational. We have been for a very long period of time. And you should know another thing, they consider us as elder brother. Some of the very old Chinese people, they genuinely feel that they should take a birth in India in order to achieve moksha. Because of India's link with Buddha and India's link with its ancient literature and other thing. So this is something which we have not grasped, or we have not taken advantage of, according to me. We are a democratic country. We are an open society. We have huge amount of fault lines. We have fault lines for based on caste, based on religion, based on region. Any number of fault lines are available here. And obviously these are studied and these are sometimes used by people who are inimical to Indian interest. But let's look at the other way. How much we know about China, about their society, about their fault lines, about their activities? Practically nothing. Very sad actually. And everybody will immediately start quoting New York Times or what. Very interesting. This New York Times and Wall Street Journal write rubbish about India. Many people even don't believe it anymore. The sense of their stories and other things. But when they write something about China, we tend to take it as a sort of a God-sent material and other thing. So the first and foremost is we must create 50 to 100 Chinese study centers in India. For instance, there are less than 50 people in India will be shocked to know who knows Mandarin, who can read and write and talk, and maybe less than 50. That's all. Whereas in China, as I told you, there is a large number of groups who know Hindi, who know various other languages and other things, who continuously and constantly study about that. For instance, let me give an example. The Three Gorges Dam was built. It was around the 90 period. Something like, roughly of the order of 10 million, 1 crore people were displaced. And of nearly 1 million seems to have perished another thing. Those days I used to write, letters, because there is no email or anything, that we should take some interest in this. I don't think anybody worried about it. But contrast it In our own country's case, this Narmada was postponed by nearly 8 to 10 years because of agitation by one lady, Nada Patkar, and then various other. It's history now, but still, what I want to stress is the ability of others to know about our fault line is much higher. The Kudangulam nuclear power plant and so many things are there. But we do not know much about our. We only talk about a communist. This is very something very amusing for me because there are only three groups of people who think that the Chinese are communist. One is what is called, there is a Jawaharlal Nehru University. Many of you will be aware of it in Delhi. Outside that, there is a dhaba called Ganga Dhaba. And there some youngsters sit in the morning, have a cup of tea. Many of them Nakshal oriented and other thing. They think China is a communist country. That is the first thing. The second is some of the small towns in Kerala where there is again chai shops where the hardcore Marxists sit, and they also think. And the third is some of the experts in television who come, who talk about their own statistic. They themselves claim that 10 to 12% of the population is only in the party first. And they don't anymore claim themselves to be communist at all. They say they are market oriented with Chinese characteristics, whatever it means. That is their definition of their system. The only country which you can perhaps think today communistic is our North Korea. And even Cuba doesn't call itself anymore communist. The point I want to stress is we have never, tried to understand their society. There is a huge gap in this. What we should have done, which I have been telling for a long period of time, is a large portion of, for instance, Anand Pai has created a significant amount of literature on Mahabharata, Ramayana and other thing in the form of comic books. We should have translated many of them into Mandarin and distributed millions of them into the Chinese society. One is they recognize, I think if I recall, 5 religions. And interestingly, Hinduism is not one of them. They recognize Protestant, Catholic and Islam, then this Jewish, but not Hinduism. I've been writing for 15 years, believe me, to our External Affairs Ministry and Embassy and to ask China to recognize Hinduism. I don't know what our ambassador is doing there actually. And really, I'm telling, we have never taken any steps. When Sri Ravi Shankar, many of you would have heard about his Art of Living, I'm sure, in Bangalore. They started a center at China. It had tremendous response. The amount of enthusiasm it generated is unbelievable. So what we should be doing is, we should get recognized and we should have some, 100 centers of Art of Living in China. And Baba Ramdev and, this madam at Cochin and this, hugging thing, Amachi, she is called actually. Like that, we have so many. I have been told explicitly when I was teaching at Shanghai University of Finance and Economics that spiritually we are starving, sir. So the church is trying to play it used to be underground church. Now it has become overground. But we are not taking any steps at all. And spiritually they are starving actually. It is for us to, the colleague of mine told you, why are you people are so, inactive? It is for you to, they are interested in yoga, they are interested in Ayurveda. Now, particularly, they are more interested in health-related issues and our food diet, so many things actually. And I tell you that we carry a very good, positive name among the ordinary public. I am not talking about this Politburo and all those people, whatever that is the political issue. I'll give you an example, very recent example. They have published in the People's Liberation Army, in their website, a video. One showing the Chinese sending their rocket up, other showing the body is getting burnt in Ganges River. And to contrast, how the two countries are, you will be shocked actually. They have their own Twitter. We'll come to that next. How they have developed their own technology and other thing. Their Weibo, their Twitter is called. There used to be so much criticism in that Twitter about this particular video. telling, why are you doing this? They are our neighbors and they are our, elder brothers, and like that. So many people have criticized this, contrasting this. This is not an appropriate thing. And PLA pulled it down from their website. That used to be the, and average Chinese, they simply don't have any antagonism or anything towards us at all. Actually, we have not understood that. We should be exploiting it actually, in terms of, as a society, we should deal with them much, much better comparatively. Instead of that, we are talking about containing. I can't understand at all. Why should we contain them? What's our big deal about them? Containing China and all this Quad and, all these. Finally, the white man will run away. Let me tell you very frankly. They will fire their bullets using our shoulders. I recall one interesting anecdote. In the Second World War time, somebody asked the British commander, will you be able to defeat Germany? He told, we will fight the Germany to the last Indian. Remember that word. And so that's what they would do actually. They would try to use India too. And nothing will come out of it. For instance, they told Iraq, having chemical weapon and not even one bottle of hydrochloric acid they could recover from there. And they have left it in such a mess actually in order to achieve there. But unfortunately, from our point of view, even though we talk about look east and other thing, our neck is always toward the west. We are genetically linked to the west, I would say. Our umbilical cords are connected to the west because large number of bureaucrats, politicians, judges, and various other people, their children and grandchildren are all settled in US or UK. Even a third-rate university in UK we run today. And it is estimated and now recognized 45 trillion US dollar is the amount which they swindled from India actually. And they killed some 2,000 plus people, unarmed people at Jallianwala Bagh. In spite of all these, we just, say that, what you call Boris is our leader, and they are so, fascinated about this white actually. As I always say, if a white plumber gives a talk in Delhi, there will be huge amount of crowd on Indian economy. At the adjacent room, if IIM professor is talking on Indian, and nobody will attend. Later on, it will be told that he was a plumber, sir. It doesn't matter. He is white. What is there? Like that. Because we seriously believe the white man will not lie. That's a fundamental flaw in our thinking system. So we are so much tuned to the. So one of my suggestion would be people who are connected to US, people who want to settle down there, nothing wrong about it. Or people who are, craving for the green card and all that. Those people should not be in decision-making positions about China. This is very, very important. They should keep away. In the court system, they say we are recusing. Like that, these people should keep away. Because the tainted glasses, then we are, and it is always told that 21st century is the Asian century. What does it mean? It doesn't mean only India. It means China and India. Let's be very clear. In another 10 years, China will be single superpower. Underline it, note it down today. I'm telling it to you on this, 17th of 17th, or I think it is 17th, right? Yes, 18th of January. Just note it down. I'm not. They are in the same position as USA was in 1946-47. Kindly remember, USA bombed Japan practically after the war was over. By May, the Germans have surrendered. And then, same way, this bioweapon has been developed by China. Not the nuclear weapon, bioweapon. And, this Wuhan Health Organization, otherwise known as World Health Organization, they have not done anything. None of the Western countries have, including US, has condemned China. Lot of theories, whether they spread it through animal, whether it came out of the lab, whether it came intentionally. A group of scientists went there and they were treated to some guided tour of, that Wuhan. That's all. and they wanted to get into the laboratory. And like if you had visited ever Tirupati, you will know what I am talking about. When you go nearer to the sanctum sanctorum, that man will say, Jarigande, Jarigande, go away, like that. He will not give you even 5 seconds to watch the God, even though you might have waited all through your life to have a darshan there. Same way was these scientists and professors were treated in Wuhan. None of these people, even today, are willing to say it is the Wuhan virus. When the pig virus came from Japan, it was called Japan encephalitis. When Ebola river basis this problem, it was called Ebola plague, Spanish plague, but not for China. Their influence and power in the global organization is so much. It was renamed as something else. Corona, COVID, and then Delta, Gamma, Gappa, and all that thing. And in between some Indian variation and Singapore, all, you can see the way in which they are treating the world. When French colleague of mine lightheartedly told, and the name China is mentioned, many of the European leaders actually wet their pants today. That is the type of situation they have brought themselves into. And they have, unless and until somebody else also develops some bio weapon and tell China that we have got equivalent class of terror, it's not going to be very easy to put them down or anything. And they have nominal basis. They have something like 17.5, 18 trillion US dollar. US itself is 21 trillion. And I am sure in another 4-5 years, they will be more than that of the US. Nominal basis. On purchasing power parity basis, they are number 1 in the world today. Number 2 is US, number 3 is India, number 4 is Japan. PPP, it is called purchasing power parity, adjusting for inflation and various other type of factors. IMF developed this indicator. And their forex reserve is of the order of 6 trillion. Ours is half a trillion. There is no comparison. We are 3 trillion in terms of our GDP reaching. And so there is nothing much for us to talk in terms of containing them or anything. They are the largest trade partner with US. China and US are the largest, in spite of all this big talk and other things. And more than 50% of the global manufacturing is today done in China. And even with India, they are very large trade partners. Till September numbers I have got, I am told till December it is much higher. Our export is of 13 billion US dollar and our import from them is 45 billion. And you will be surprised to know many of the nuclear reactor related parts are imported from China. They are a global hardware producers. And of course, often on some talk take place, they will move out of China and nothing. That all 1 or 2 of them have moved out to Vietnam or Thailand or anything. And most of the global companies are accepting the terms offered by China to operate there. Whether it is your Google or whether it is your various other type of Microsoft and other thing, they are all have to, because the market is very large. One. Second is in the global supply chain, they play a very, very major role. Let's not try to hide it or let's not try to. So if you look at on a global scale today, we are extraordinarily good in software. We are not great inventors. Let's be very clear about it. Last 80 years, you name me one product India has invented, which has revolutionized the world. Nothing. One product. We are not inventors, but we are great adapters. That is very, very important. We adapt to what is invented. We have got 650 billion, I am told 650 million smartphones today in India. People use it like anything, and we have 900 plus odd million regular phones. And even in a small village or town, you can get it repaired in case there is some problem or something. Actually, we are very good at that. We are very good in adapting what others have invented. So we are very good in terms of software. They are extremely good in terms of hardware. This combination, India-China axis, will completely alter the way in which world is functioning. This is something. Sir, don't we have land problem with them? Yes, we do have. We have a problem with Pakistan. A huge, mass of land of ours is occupied by them, and still, what we have not declared Pakistan as a terrorist state. We are still having never talks with them, and we continue to have some, instead of playing cricket at Lahore, we play at Dubai, and all sorts of things are being done with Pakistan. With the UK, I told you, after 45 trillion US dollar has been taken away from us, and there, the British Museum, if they have to, give back all the artifacts and other thing, it will be empty. That's all, because all of it is looted only. Nothing is their own thing, and but with them we are very friendly. So with China, definitely we should talk. We should discuss, deliberate. Not an inch of our what we claim to be our land, we should give them. And kindly note, with Pakistan, it's called LOC, Line of Control. With China, it's called LAC, Line of Actual Control, because with China, we have never demarcated. I'm talking about from the 1947. There has never been a demarcation of the boundary between India and China. It's what we claim, what they claim, nothing, they claim that Arunachal Pradesh belonged to somebody complained. I told you claim that Shanghai belonged to you. What is that? Claims are, nothing big deal about it. You create a map where Shanghai and Beijing you show as part of India. Then nothing, like for instance, BBC has been claiming for the last 50 years, Indian administered Kashmir. You also say that, England administered Scotland. Nothing, you lose or gain. The point is, we must have a discussion, absolutely no doubt about it. And this is the only source of contention between us, this land issue. And let us not fall into the trap of the white man who is instigating us in order to be a counterbalance for, because he cannot fight. Let me be very blunt about it. Europe has lost its will to fight. They are all in pubs and music halls and beaches and other things. Average age of the Belgian army, believe me, is 42, and including their belt size is also 42, 43. So there is no question of they fighting anything. They will just do the only group which could fight is some portion of the Americans and some Germans. That's all. Nobody else, and nobody else really want to fight in the current context, because it will, everybody knows about the massive amount of destructive weapons we have all accumulated. And the last most important point is the entire world is getting altered, not in terms of the old cliche, socialism, communism, capitalism, and all that 19th century philosophies were used in 20th century, and they've all gone. Actually, what is today is civilizational based identity of countries is coming back. See the way in which Middle East is getting churned by this Saudi Arabian king, MBS. They want to alter, and they want to play a very large role. That whole Middle East is becoming a huge amount of churning point now today, with the Taliban and Boko Haram and Imanis, various type of groups want to take control over that actually. And with Afghanistan and Pakistan going into the Taliban hands, it's going to be a very, very different type of a global ordering or global restructuring. Europe, will have essentially some portion of the Christian thing, not much in the southern portion. Most of the northern portion and some portion of US will be what are called NONE, nuns. Those who are not believing in any religion or anything, those who are consider themselves to be agnostic, or in US there is some 30% are nuns today, NONE, in their census. To which religion you identify yourself with, they say none. So this nuns will not be able to deal with the rising Islam. And, much of the Europe is already in the Islamic grip actually today. They have lost the will to fight. They have lost the ability to influence. And so the world is getting reorganized based upon this issue of civilization, not on the basis of the old, or a socialist country or a, capitalist. All these only in India we continue to debate because we are normally 100 years behind in terms of, what is happening. We continue to, mouth the slogans of the 18th century, 19th century. Nobody cares. And we alone are the torch bearers of those. And we have Voltaire, and we still think that, half of the Britain thinks they are ruling India, and quarter of the Indian think that Britain is still ruling us. So there is a big type of a problem in this. So civilizational based countries are coming up, and it's not going to be a single country or anything, multiple. And in that, we visualize the major point of conflict will be between the Confucius Buddhist and the Islam. It's going to be not, may not be visible today, but you will be able to see it in the next 5 to 10 years. So we should be able to understand this, handle this. Where do we stand civilizationally? We in China are the only river valley civilizations left in Asia. All others are desert-based civilization. Let's understand the critical difference between the two. So we should choose our natural ally. This is the most important thing. And so when the time comes, we will understand that it is no more a white man's world. In 1990, G7, I'm sure most of you would have heard about G7, all these US, Canada, Germany, England, and other things, predominantly white man's country. They had 52% of the global GDP, 1990, 30 years before. And today they have something like 32% purchasing power parity basis. And 1990, the emerging markets, India, China, Brazil, and Indonesia, had 33%. Today they have got 52%. Kindly note, US and China alone today, 47% of the global GDP. It's not going to be small. So the West is on decline. That they are recognizing. And in another 5 to 10 years, because of the COVID, it is getting accentuated. The share of G7 will only be 25% of the global GDP. So West is on decline, Asian century. So from white, it is getting shifted to yellow. And from yellow, it will come to brown. Don't worry about it. And from brown, much later to black. So this is what is the cycle which is taking place. So at this time, declining powers are dangerous. Let me be very clear about it. Because they would try to do anything in order to maintain their position, including domestically. If a political party or its fortunes are on decline, it is very dangerous. It will try to, do anything in order to maintain its position. Same way, globally, whites are declining power. Unfortunately, that is the situation. And in order to, we have to internalize it. And to start with, the people who have got umbilical cord connection with the Western world, white world, should not be the one who make decisions regarding our civilizational relationship with other countries. Our foreign policy should be decided by people who are going to be internally settle down here, live here, what do you call, die here type of people. So this is what is very, very critical. I think we should look ahead 10 years from now onwards, where we will be. And, we can talk what is there. And there are enough, Chinese are they love talking. They will have 9 hours, 10 hours of talk, where from the Chinese side on our land issue, nothing will come out of it. And we have enough bureaucrats in India, I'm sure, who can talk for 15 hours even without, telling anything. Once Bhutto seemed to have, jokingly commented, there used to be one Swaran Singh, many of you may not even remember. He was a foreign minister. He had the habit of talking for 10, 12 hours. At the end of it, nothing you will you will say so many. There used to be one Krishna Menon who seemed to have talked 20 hours or something anyway. He didn't say anything. So we have enough number of people like that who can, and our bureaucrats are extremely well known for this actually, who can, they can talk on a specific theme, uh, specific concrete theme for 10 hours without telling anything. So we can continue to have a dialogue, nothing wrong about it. We have it with this Pakistan. I don't see any reason why we can't have it with China. I am not telling you give up all this land to China, nothing like that. I am not telling. We can continue to have this mutual understanding of not having any understanding itself is a very very good thing actually. Kindly note, we are to spend a huge amount of money in order to maintain all our forces on the northern front as well as on the eastern front. And if you are reasonably comfortable with China, I am telling you, Pakistan will come around, because Pakistan is slightly, has to become a poodle of China for the economic and other reason. That's all. There is no other. It has to move itself away from US and other thing. It's in very bad shape. So that's not a very major thing. But everybody knows the Kashmir problem can be solved only through Europe. Only in Europe, when this whole issue of Eurobia is sorted out, we will be able to have our solution on this J&K. So Pakistan also knows that where do they stand actually vis-a-vis this issue. So once we become moderately, not necessarily non-antagonistic to China, then they will be able to handle actually much better. They will be able to tell Pakistan to keep quiet. And that's a route which we should actually take. In the long term, civilizationally looking at it, and in the past looking at our own relationship, we are much better. Software power and hardware power combining together will create a new axis in the world. This is something which we should, what you may loosely call, we should recognize. We have to alter the axis of the world. And it's the Asian century. And when you call it Asian century, obviously China will play a very, and they're far ahead, because in the mid 70s itself, they started reforming, which we started only in the early 90s. After PV Narasimha Rao time and other thing, they started. So they had something like roughly, 15, 20 years of advantage. When Deng Xiaoping told about, the cat should catch the mice. It doesn't matter whether it is a black cat or a white cat. After that, they went into completely market thing. So following thing we should do, we should flood China with our literature, with our yoga centers, with our Ayurveda, with our pranayam and all the things Hindu. Get Hinduism recognized in China. And they are starved of spiritualism. And we should be able to meet the demand and requirement of it. And of course, they have a huge, huge, huge market. They are talking about some, 4,000 this BMW sold in India and other thing, when they sell their 4 lakh. So there is a, we should be able to understand this. So they are economically a very huge powerhouse. That's so we should influence them, get good relationship with them, understand their fault lines. We should start some at least 30, 40 China study centers in India, about their literature, about their art, about their society, about their language, any number of them. And we should know China through our lens, not through European lens or anything. And in the long run, alignment of both these countries will change the global power axis completely. That's very, very critical and important. This is what I thought I will like to stress on this evening.
Okay, the first question is from Raj Abhishek Bey. He's asking, how can India align with China while dealing with Islam and Christian missionaries?
Yeah, China, you see, there is a huge underground church used to be there in China. Now, because of the liberalization and other thing, it is not so much. But let's be very clear, China has opened it up in terms of Confucius and Buddhist influences. China considers, one shouldn't even mention this, China considers Islam to be a cult. And actually, in many of their documents, they mention it in terms of need for reforming the groups and other things. They don't consider it in terms of the idea of spiritualism and other things. And so that's why they are putting them into camps and trying to. And some places they even say that it's a mental problem. Anyhow, so we should be able to develop linkages with the traditional Confucius and traditional Buddhist influences in China. This is what is very, very critical. Yeah.
Yeah. The second question is from Shikha Rai. She's asking, sir, do you feel that in ancient times, as we have used spiritual aspects like Buddhist traditions or Tantra traditions as soft power policy with China, should that be revived?
Yeah, should be definitely. We should be continuously having a huge amount of these interactions and interplay. These are our commonalities which we should stress actually, and we can offer good amount of what one can call material on this, as well as we can create this Buddhist the what they call the tourist circuit and other thing. Quite a huge number of Chinese will be very interested there. Incidentally, after Japanese, Korean, Chinese are one of the largest globe-trotting groups actually, in terms of and because they have got surplus funds available to them and other thing. So we should. Sorry.
This question is then from Manish Kumar Singh. What about the Tibet issue? How should we deal with it?
We should talk to them. We should discuss with them. We should deal with it. There is nothing you can. From 50 onwards, we never recognize Tibet as a separate country and other thing.
I think this question is one question from Ritul on the Aksai Chin issue. How can India and China align or collaborate on common issues? And while India has suffered
The
lots of
China is going on from Jawaharlal Nehru time, if you want to be very precise, actually. Anything connected with the land, the only way to sort it out is to sit and talk, acquiesce to the Chinese demands. That is what I am telling. We are in 2022. By 2027, China will be the single superpower. Everybody will say that, yes, they are the superpower. US will be there, but another power, that's all, not a superpower. US is undergoing tremendous amount of stress in terms of its society. China is able to maintain reasonably its social framework. That is something, social fabric. We will have to discuss it in some other context. Anyhow, 51% of the child birth in US is out of wedlock. US is having a huge crisis in terms of its family system, in terms of its social cohesion and other things. So it's according to me, these are some underlying basic factors which can destabilize a country, not just your GDP growth and other things. That will be impacted because of the social system. So 5 years or 6, 7 years, I may be around or I may not be around. That doesn't matter. But kindly remember, they are going to be the superpower, and perhaps for a period of something like 40 to 50 years. And world will be totally changed. I am telling, take advantage of it, be part of the Axis, be part of the Asian, make it Asian century, and don't fall into the schemes of the white man. The declining powers, they will use you to counterbalance. We cannot counterbalance China. Let me be very blunt about it. As I told you, we are 3 trillion, they are 20 trillion. Where is counterbalance? We will just be, shouting and other thing. And the jingoism is not going to take us anywhere. with China. With Pakistan, jingoism will take us far, far ahead because historical reason, another thing. The way they split from us and the way they treated us, another thing. But not to China. China has concretely name me one thing which China has harmed India inside. They have exploited our fault lines. As I told you, any country will do it. But we are the only country who have not been doing it. We are self-righteous. We have just been talking about what is that called? Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam Vadapav. That's what we are telling all over again and again. In United Nations, we always say, this and that, and everybody listens to us and laughs behind us. That's all. Nothing more. Incidentally, we insisted China should become a member of the this General Council of UN. They offered it to us. There is enough records for that. Actually, we told no. They should become. That's okay. Nothing at that point of time. It might have been. Thing is, we are very self-righteous, and currently we should follow the same thing like non-aligned, which we were following during the regular Cold War between US and Russia. I don't see why we are suddenly moving away from it to join this Quad and other thing. They will, let me be very blunt, the US, UK, Germany, others will drop us like hot potato when the time comes. They will instigate us. They will try to, what we should do, finally, I will tell, we should deal with China like how rabdi is made. Many of you would have seen in the streets of Lucknow or even in Ahmedabad, I have seen actually. There's a huge kadai, they put milk. Rabdi is nothing but condensed milk. Many of you would know about it. This kadai is, you have huge fire below. It's heated. And the man will be standing with the hand fan, hand thing, and then he will be cooling it. So heat from below and cool from above. That is the fundamental thing which we should adopt. That is the original Chanakya tactics. So find the fault lines of China, influence them, heat it from below, if we can, to keep some amount of deterrence, not to split that country or anything. That we can also do this and cool it from above. Have discussion, talks, and further talks, extended talks, and then involved talks. Various type of expert committee talks, and basically our lines are not, demarcated. Either of us. It's not something. It's historically it is like that only. Unlike Pakistan, where the line is extremely demarcated, very clear. You cross the line, he crosses. But here it is not like that. It's a sort of a conventional and sort of. So I think this rabdi treatment is something which we should remember. This is what we should be. And we are not in a position to do it because we have not studied them. We don't have enough first-hand material in our hands about their own issues. And as I told you, to start with, first 10 leaders other than Xi we should know of that country. Till then, I think we cannot. They are our neighbors. It's a very interesting thing. They are a very big country. We don't know. I asked some senior bureaucrat, they laugh at me actually. Your question is valid, but that's a fact. So that's not something which is to be proud of. Right? So thank you very much. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for giving wonderful insights.